Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our kickoff session for the 26-27 Kentucky Advising Academy and Early Postsecondary Opportunity webinar series. The series is hosted by the Council on Postsecondary Education here in Kentucky, and my name is Robin Hebert. I'm the Senior Fellow for Policy Development here in Student Access and Success, and I'm joined today by my colleagues, Mitzi Holland, who is the Director of the Kentucky Advising Academy, and also we're well supported by Heather Fazey, who does a really masterful job of navigating and working behind the scenes with our technology and our scheduling to help us bring you a really high quality experience during the webinar series. So many thanks to Heather in advance, and we look forward to the webinar today. We're so excited to kick off this year's webinar series entitled Aligning Early Postsecondary Opportunities, Advising, and Resources. This is Kentucky's College Access and Success series. We have been planning for quite some time, and I think we have something that's a pretty amazing menu of topics and special guests in store for the series and for all of you this year. This fall, we will be exploring the early post-secondary opportunity landscape with some sessions on supporting students through EPSOs and also helping them make sure that college credits from dual credit and advanced placement and international baccalaureate and Cambridge, that all of these count in all the ways that are possible for students. We'll also take a deep dive into some data and accountability. We'll be exploring Kentucky's longitudinal data system and some reporting that can really help support our K12 and post-secondary systems. And as well as how we'll look at how Kentucky defines and measures college and career readiness, both at the K12 and post-secondary levels. We're going to take a look at the always popular topic of affordability and some great new strategies and programs for Kentucky students and families for funding their post-secondary dreams and aspirations. And then to wind out the fall, we'll also be discussing how we can strengthen dual credit systems through partnerships and the results of a brand new audit that will be going on of teacher and course capacity within our state. And then finally, in December, we'll explore student readiness beyond academics. We'll be looking at some of those relationships and life skills that can really help young people thrive after high school and through their post-secondary journey. So that's just a preview of the fall part of the series, and there's much more to come in the spring of 2027 too. So we invite you to register for the entire series using the QR code that you'll be able to see here on the screen or the link that we'll place in the chat. And we really invite you to share this opportunity with your colleagues who might be interested as well. Don't forget that ELA credit is always available for every session that you attend. Now, for today's kickoff session, we are thrilled that you have joined us for this inaugural webinar for 26-27. We're focused on some important policy updates and exciting new tools and resources that are hot off the press. So today we welcome several distinguished and expert guests as we talk about some updates to student communication policies in Senate Bill 181 and House Bill 67, as well as the brand new My Kentucky Future Act, which is also known as House Bill 307. So as always, please feel free to insert questions into the Q&A feature during the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer your questions live. But if time gets away and we don't have time to do that live, we'll always follow up with answers to your questions via email to everyone who's in attendance today. So without further ado, I'm really happy to welcome John Powell. John is an attorney with the Kentucky School Board Association, and he's here today to discuss some updates related to student communication. So John, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you all for having me.
Yeah, we're really glad you're here. So to begin our conversation today, John, I'd love for you to just give us a brief overview of the legislation beginning back in 2025.
Okay, so in 2025, last year, the General Assembly passed Senate Bill 181. I'm pretty sure everybody across the Commonwealth heard about that after it happened. It was in the news quite a bit. The uh, the spirit of that bill was in the right place. I guess its heart was in the right place, but the implementation mechanism was a little bit, I think, cumbersome is the best word to use for that. And districts had trouble following the letter of the law. It sort of made communication between district employees and volunteers and students difficult. if not impossible in certain situations where it shouldn't have been impossible. So the legislature got a lot of feedback on that over the summer of 2025, and it sort of moved to the top of their to-do list for the 2026 session. So during that session, they worked on it quite a bit, got a lot of feedback from school districts and superintendents and employees and other interested parties, and they passed House Bill 67 to sort of, I guess, fix the problems of Senate Bill 181 that were hard to implement. And of course, the joke while they were passing House Bill 67 was, since it dealt with student communication, it was House Bill 67. I don't I don't have any middle school age kids. My kids are well out of middle school, so I don't know what that means. But
Uh,
apparently it's funny. So,
yeah, I'm
uh,
glad we probably don't have any students on today because they would definitely be making some noise in the background.
right, right. So House Bill 67 redefined a lot of the terms. It added some exclusion language, and it just sort of cleaned up a lot of the implementation problems that districts were having.
Yeah. Okay. John, can you tell us a little bit more about the specifics of 181 and 67? Like what are the big changes that school districts are wrestling with right now?
So, when they first passed 181 in 2025, the intent was to have communication between employees and volunteers and students in that district sort of flow through a controlled channel. And the policy behind that was, well, we want to cut down on communication that shouldn't be happening.
Mhm.
Um, and so 181 said, every district is going to have a designated method of electronic communication between students and people in the district. And then when House Bill 67 came along this past year, it um, you know, sort of expanded, like communication between a student and somebody in their household that works in the district that maybe before was sort of cut out. Now it's allowed because I mean, why wouldn't you be able to communicate with people that you live with, right? And then it sort of narrowed the definition of volunteer. Um, and just, I don't want to read the statute, but since this is kind of a legal question, I'm going to do that. So I
Okay.
apologize. But
Okay.
like in House Bill 67, like what the law is right now, which by the way can be found in KRS 160.145. It says that a qualified school volunteer is not somebody who's enrolled in the district. So, in other words, you could have like an 18-year-old person that maybe works in the office or something, and they're a student, and they work in there part time. So, they're not covered by this. Whereas before, they kind of were.
Okay.
But now a volunteer is a student teacher, a non-faculty coach or assistant coach, a non-faculty sponsor of an extracurricular program or activity, or a school-sponsored academic tutor, or somebody who is in a non-faculty student services role designated as a qualified school volunteer by the local board.
Okay.
So you can see that like the definition for volunteers has been uh, narrowed. Um, And then, when you're communicating with a family member, that also has been expanded to include uh, parent, brother, sister, son, daughter, aunt, uncle, cousin, nephew, niece, grandparent, uh, or an adult that resides in the same household as the student.
Okay, all right. I think it's a great example of how the legislature has been responsive to feedback from the field in terms of, making adjustments that make it possible for districts to have transparency and also make student safety a priority. I'm curious, if you have any like good advice for districts who are trying to figure out how do we balance compliance with the law and the practical needs that they have to communicate with students, and maybe if you've seen any examples of innovation or success with this legislation.
Right. Well, I think the first place I would start would be with your specific district policy. And KSBA, of course, writes the model policies for all the districts. And I believe it's our policy. Let me double check the number here. It's our policy 08.2324. So if you consult that policy in your policy handbook, I think that will get you started in the right place. And then if you have further questions, you can always check the statute, which, like I said, is 160.145. And I think that will sort of lead you to like a series of questions, and the first question is, well, am I an employee or am I a volunteer or am I neither? Right. And then
Mhm.
once you decide what you are, then you say, well, am I using the designated electronic communication system or am I using something else? And then if you're using something else, I think you want to take a look at the 11 exclusions that they've included for, communication outside the designated system. Um, and that's in KRS 160.145, subsection 1, subsection H, number 3. So way down in there. But there's 11 exceptions that I think you should look through and see if you fit under any one of those.
Okay, so it's sort of like this resource you have is sort of like a decision tree. Like if you're this or if you're that, then here's what you should do or how you should be thinking about communication with students. Am I hearing you correctly on that?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
that's a good way to put it. A decision tree, and maybe try to go through that, before the school starts in August, and
Mm.
sort of see where you fit and what kind of circumstances would be in the exceptions part.
Yeah, yeah. So I know that, student communication and communicating with families is just really a priority for K-12 districts. And so for a lot of them, this has felt like a bit of a challenge. And I know that the districts really want to have confidence that they're meeting the letter of the law while still having the opportunity to, to communicate with schools. I'm wondering if you have any guidance or ideas about how districts might think about getting this information like to all of their stakeholders who might be impacted by it. I'm sure it's a professional development challenge for a lot of districts.
Right, right. And I know several districts at the end of the year, in May or June, whenever that happened, a lot of districts sent out emails to employees and volunteers that sort of said, hey, here's the law, here's the things that they changed, here's the things that we need to look out for. And it's
Mhm.
kind of what I just went through a minute ago, maybe not in the same boring detail, but uh, I think districts are very good about communicating, through email to their employees and volunteers, like what they kind of need to do or how they need to prepare uh, to get ready for this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that's part of their on-ramping and their professional development, especially for new employees or people who are new to their district, just to understand their policies for their own school or their own district. All right. Well, John, I really appreciate the conversation today. I wanted to ask one last question, and that would be if you are going to give one piece of advice to school leaders or counselors or even your college partners who work with students who are still in high school as they prepare for this upcoming school year, what would you tell them?
Well, I think, and not to beat a dead horse, but I think it kind of goes back to what I said a minute ago. First off, decide what you are, and sometimes that's easy. I'm the high school math teacher. Well, clearly you're an employee, right?
Uh-huh.
But if you're, a college professor and you're teaching some sort of dual credit thing, like not even at the high school or whatever, I think you need to decide what, if any, employment or volunteer relationship you have with the district, because that's
Mhm.
again the first question.
Yeah.
So, decide what you are, and then really, if you're outside the designated communication system, if you're using something else, uh, look at those uh, ex exceptions for the law, the 11 exceptions that I talked about, look at those very carefully because they're very well defined. And I think they will give you a good idea of whether or not it's okay to proceed or whether you should, call somebody and say, hey, I need to do this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so in your example of do I need to call somebody, who would be like the authority on, like, if you're like, I'm not exactly sure who I am or what category I fall into, who would you suggest they contact about that?
Well, I think if it's a general type question, I would offer myself up as
Mhm,
somebody that you could contact. But, a lot of things are district specific.
mhm,
All 171 school districts are different. And they've all got different agreements with different people and they do, if it's some sort of specific situation, you might want to call somebody at the district in the central office.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, just to get good clarity. All right. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us this update on student communications and the changes on House Bill 67. I will never hear House Bill 67 the same way after our conversation today. But thank you for sharing this update with us. And we really appreciate your expertise on this.
Well, thank you all
Um,
again for having me.
yep. Yeah, absolutely. So, our next segment on today's webinar is actually a pre recorded conversation with Mickey Ray, who is the Chief Academic Officer at the Kentucky Department of Education, and Amanda Ellis, who is our Senior Vice President of Student Access and Success here at CPE. Mickey and Amanda were not able to be with us live today. And so we got together a few days ago to discuss their thoughts on the all new My Kentucky Future Act and what it will mean for students and families, as well as what it will mean for state agencies and schools and post secondary institutions. So, we're going to learn a lot about how the different agencies and schools and institutions will need to work together for the very best results during implementation of the My Kentucky Future Act. So, Heather, without further ado, let's go ahead and play the recording now. I am so happy to be joined today by Mickey Marinelli at the Kentucky Department of Education and Dr. Amanda Ellis, who also works here at the Council on Post-Secondary Education. So, Mickey, welcome. I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Robin. Well, I am honored to be here with you today. I currently serve as Chief Academic Officer. I'm primarily working with the Office of Teaching and Learning at the Kentucky Department of Education. And so it's been a pleasure to be able to think through the topic that we're going to be discussing today and how that will better serve educators and students across the Commonwealth.
I really appreciate you making time for us today, Mickey. And then Amanda, if you want to give a brief introduction about your role at CPE.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. Amanda Ellis. I'm the Senior Vice President over Student Access and Success. And so we focus on any type of way to remove barriers and increase opportunities for all students of all ages. And so very excited about this opportunity and the door to be open on us to collaborate further with K12 for sure. So looking forward to the conversation, Robin.
Awesome. Well, we're here today to provide our viewers an update on the My Kentucky Future Act that was passed in the last legislative session. And it introduces an opportunity for students to connect with post-secondary education earlier than normal. And so it involves proactive admissions, which is something that maybe some of our viewers are not really familiar with. So I'd love to hear you all talk a little bit about what exactly is proactive admissions. What does it look like in practice, and what could it mean for students?
Yeah, I'll start on with this and definitely Mickey jump in. But with proactive admissions, it's not a guaranteed admissions or an automatic admissions. There's a lot of states that have done different approaches, but what it is, it's notification to students to let them know that their academic performance through GPA and possibly GPA and their college readiness assessment, depending on how the institution decides, the public institution decides, to let them know that they're eligible, what financial aid is available, and to really open the door of possibilities for students who may have thought, I'm not college material, meaning when we say college, we mean 2 or 4-year institution, short-term degree, short-term credentials or 4-year or advanced. So whatever additional education is going to get you to your career path, we want everyone to be able to pursue that and know, be informed and know that they're worthy of continuing their education. And so this is the first step Kentucky has taken to put into law to notify all of our public school students and private school students. We'll talk about that a little bit later, about the opportunities that our public 2-year and 4-year campuses offer.
All right. So Amanda, I just want to clarify, we're talking about public and private high school students getting
Yes.
these notifications about what is available to them, what they qualify for. Mickey,
That's
did
right.
you want to add anything?
Just a little bit. And Amanda, I'm going to piggyback off of what you said about removing barriers, because I think
Yes.
the power here is that, these students will get personalized communications around what
right.
they would be eligible for enrollment and for admissions. And so it doesn't complete the process for them.
That's
but
right.
it hopefully will build curiosity and a willingness to think through, these are my options. And I think for each and every student, unless they're doing a lot of work on their own or it's a priority of parents and families, they may not have access to that information in one place. So there's a lot of power here in
That's
eliminating that uncertainty and just really opening doors for students.
Absolutely.
Mickey, I love what you said there about sort of igniting curiosity about what is out there. So that to me is one way that this could change the college going experience or the college going intent for some of our students. What other positive benefits do you see about how this could change the high school experience and the transition to college for our students in Kentucky?
I think one of the things, it can be overwhelming for parents and families and students to consider all of the steps when you're considering different colleges and universities. And so we hope that this will be important, just to help them to kind of baby step through what is a pretty complex process. And so I'm excited to see how we can work together to improve communications to students and their families statewide. And then also what we can learn about the barriers that exist. And I know we'll talk more about that as we go along, but to really be empowered as partners from CPE and KDE to really come together to think through how we can support educators in getting this message to students and making, again, as I said, what is a pretty complex process and consideration, an important decision for students and parents and families in a way that is manageable.
Yeah. And I really think, just to add to Mickey's comments on that, I think it really strengthens that transition point, which can be kind of an unsettling place. One student, the same student who is walking across that stage to graduate, where K12 is like, we've arrived and we've hit our milestone, is the beginning steps for higher education, regardless of what path they choose for that post-secondary education experience and who's there in the middle. And this really gives us an opportunity to really clarify our language and also have a better understanding of how K12 works differently than higher education and how we can have some common messaging and clarity around that transition and what is available, because it is not the same. And so really having those touch points and elevating the resources that our state offers is really an incredible opportunity to do something we have not done before.
Yeah. I love the idea that students who maybe don't have a lot of background with post-secondary education, or maybe their parents don't have a lot of background, will have more information, at their fingertips that could help them, Mickey, to your point of taking those baby steps, through this kind of overwhelming process. So I'm wondering about the particulars of this act. Like what did it do that's different from how we have approached communication about post-secondary education in the past?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one to get started. So, all of our campuses, even our private campuses in Kentucky, work extremely hard, a lot with K12 and with other partners, to reach students early and really encourage future planning and exploration, career exploration, and what's available in our state. And we've made strides in that direction. We have futurity.org, which has taken all of these state resources and put them into one place. And that was a group effort to really identify needs with specific student populations and our family populations that have specific needs. And that is getting there, but that still isn't meeting the mark. And what this gives us the opportunity to do is have a real strategic approach and a systemic way of notifying and intentionally reaching out to these students in a way that's never been done before. There's not a hope and a prayer on this one that we reach students. There's a method and a process that K12 is working hard to prepare for, and I'll let Mickey speak to that part. But our campuses are really grateful for the opportunity to not only reach out to seniors, but they will start to be able to communicate with upcoming sophomores, juniors, seniors, and even the graduating class. So it's not a one and done, but it's this beginning of an early relationship of possibilities as students mature and go through their high school career and explore. There are already post-secondary opportunities, after high school opportunities, reaching out to them and saying, hey, you're on track, or did you know we have these programs? Do you know we offer these scholarships? It really opens the door for communication early and often, rather than at the end, because the end is too late. And so that is a huge surge for us to really take advantage of and to think through of how we can be student-centered even before they reach our campuses, and ways that we can communicate with families in an appropriate way, and with our K12 districts of really partnering in opening up the options for their future. But Mickey, I'll turn it back to you for really that K12 approach.
This will allow school districts to very intentionally annually invite students to engage in the program.
Yeah.
And then if they and their families opt into this, then that information that they're willing to share with post-secondary institutions will allow them again to share that directory information so that they will have direct and personalized communications around where they would be eligible to attend. And so I think that it's going to, as you said, Amanda, just streamline communications for parents and families, and then for school districts, it will, I think, encourage more intentional conversations along the way, as you're just describing, because it almost will create a network of students and families who are having these conversations, and not just around admissions. I think it's going to help with scholarships, with financial aid. So it's a really exciting opportunity to have rich conversation that should already be happening around the ILP, those individualized learning plan. But this is like another step that will have a true sort of deliverable for students as a result of that engagement.
Yeah, it's exciting that it would be about somewhat about career pathways and somewhat about eligibility and admissions and even affordability. I mean, it seems like it hits all of the things that are really important to students. Sounds like this is going to take a lot of collaboration among the state agencies and different partners. And so talk a little bit about the roles of all the different players who are working on this act.
Yeah, so I can start off with that. We recently convened just to get started, and it was a great convening of lots of partners, and even a couple weren't even able to come. So there's some key players in this. Obviously, KDE is a key player in that connection with K12 and really fulfilling not only what is required in the bill, but really preparing the districts for these changes in Infinite Campus, for the outreach, for the mindset change. Like it's a big shift. And so the districts are a big piece of that. KDE is a big piece. CPE, we're coordinating to make sure it's very smooth and that K12 and KDE have the connections they need with our public institutions. And so our public institutions have to also be prepared to take this data in, to really think through their outreach and their recruitment practices, relationships and network building, and in addition to being prepared to either adopt or continue a common online application, which we can talk about in a little bit, to implement that for to make it streamlined, that is outlined in the bill. We also have Kia that is a player in this, and they are are required to put the futurity.org either QR code or website on their keys letter to really lead the students and their parents or family members or those who are taking care of the students to financial aid opportunities, to jobs and careers that are available in Kentucky, and how that aligns with different programs and credentialing. And then we also have KY Stats that is required for reporting longitudinal data over time on impact of this, and just hoping to see our overall college going rate increase so more high school students matriculate into a post-secondary education opportunity. And so we have some major players, and there's a lot of movement at one time. But those are multiple players, and even with those role groups that are identified, there are lots of people working behind the scenes to build out these processes for the learner experience and the family experience to be friendly, approachable, exciting, and not overwhelming or above anybody's head or making them feel unworthy. It's really to be, hey, we want you and we want you to succeed, and we see you in our future. And so that takes a lot of coordination, but I can tell you the will to pivot and do these things to make it work has been very positive, very proactive, and we're excited. We're very excited about our partners.
Yeah, yeah. Mickey, I wanted to ask you specifically about, you know, when KDE is thinking about implementation of this and the districts are thinking about messaging with students, talk a little bit about, like, what can students and families expect in terms of communication? What do you see as promising practice or innovative ideas out there about how the people who are going to implement this on the ground, how are they going to communicate with students and families? What's happening there?
Absolutely. Happy to speak to that a bit. So we are really working to try to support schools and district leaders in envisioning what this can be for parents and families, and how they can encourage and ensure that folks understand the program and that they see the value out of participation. So there have been, and I can't take credit for this at all, but my friends and colleagues in the Office of Education Technology are working very hard to address the data collection side of this. And so there are new forms that will be in place in Infinite Campus, and there are ways that we can utilize the parent portal to directly communicate with parents and families in that way. And so, you know, I want them to be supported in having language to even introduce the programmatic side of this work, but then also we have to be able to effectively capture the information that students and families are willing to give and that are in line with FERPA laws, and ensure that what we end up with in terms of the data set is useful to those post-secondary institutions and actually furthers the communication directly back to those parents and families. One other aspect of this, though, that I think is important is that we will be starting a new survey from the KDE of the schools and districts to try to learn, you know, what enrollment methods are you utilizing? What has been proven to be especially effective? That shouldn't be a secret. You know, we want to make sure that we can elevate those bright spots to each and every district across the state. And then also, in addition to that, you know, what are those barriers that we've referenced earlier, and how we, maybe as the KDE partner or potentially as a CPE partner, you know, how can we work together to address those so that more and more students are able to engage and see the value add of participating in the program.
Yeah, that sounds great. I don't know, Amanda, if you wanted to speak any more to the FERPA issues. I know that on the K12 side, you know, we have major concerns there. And, you know, that's always a concern when you're talking about communicating with students who are underage. So I didn't know if you wanted to mention anything more about that at all.
Actually, I'm going to defer that to Mickey. They've done a lot of legwork on that because it's two different sections. So I want her to speak to that. If it's okay.
Sure. Happy to do that. So we are going to publish an Infinite Campus form that will be used again to invite families through the parent portal or campus messenger. So students will be invited to participate, but under FERPA, only parents or eligible students, so 18 years or older, can opt in or opt out of sharing that information. And so one of the things that our OET partners, the Office of Education Technology, are asking school district leaders to think about is to go back and review that directory information, look at the annual FERPA directory notifications. Do they need to be updated so that we can ensure that not only are we being good stewards of that information and that we're following the law, but that it actually becomes a way to increase family engagement across the Commonwealth.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. Thanks for that clarification. I know that you all don't have a crystal ball to look into the future, but what challenges do you see out there on the horizon as we work toward implementation of the Act?
Yeah, I think anything that's new always has some bumps in the road. And so, just the logistics of getting folks well informed of what they're consenting to, I think is a big deal. Ensuring that those who assist high school students and families have a common message. And we're working on that. The purpose of the proactive admissions, what it is and what it is not, I think is really important. I think the other thing is just really learning how to be a coordinated team for those who haven't really worked together before. Our data systems are different. Our timelines in our school years, they look the same, they're not the same. And so just really navigating that first year, whenever we hear about it, people tend to think it's going to happen overnight. And really this year is the growing year. So I think it's important to note that while KDE is building out their data collection, their feedback loops to really get this, one of the things is they're going to have to report out on barriers and things that didn't work and what did work. CPE is going to have to report out in a couple of years on effectiveness. So we have to define what effectiveness means to make sure that we are responding and being accountable for what we're supposed to implement. And so I think we're all learning, for the higher ed on this side, adopting or creating, there's two options there, a common application to be used takes integration. And, and some campuses may have to integrate something new, or we may have to adopt something new. That takes time. Using Futurity as the platform that's outlined, the requirements that are outlined in the bill, Futurity meets those requirements, but we're still going to have to integrate that to make sure that's accessible for everybody and that whatever that common application is all works. So we have a user experience and we have that behind the curtain logistics of making sure that it's all working, meeting timelines. All that takes work, and it takes being flexible and nimble as we learn what works and what doesn't, and really, I think, showing a little grace, but really hyping this up. I think this is a great idea, and the piece I hope that even despite any bumps in the road, that we don't lose sight about the possibilities for students. And we don't lose sight about the possibilities of how we're improving communication and helping families and students make informed decisions about their future, of not assuming they can't do anything or that it's impossible. Our state offers an incredible amount of resources, incredible. Our debt rate is very low compared to many of our states, our neighboring states. But if you don't know that and you don't know how to utilize those resources, it's not really an opportunity. And for me, the logistics and the bumps in the road are worth it if we open doors that many never thought were possible to improve their quality of life, their opportunities, and their mobility. So it's worth it. It won't be perfect, but I think we're on a good strong start.
Yeah. Thanks. Mickey, anything to add?
Very much in agreement with Amanda. You know, I had thought about cross-agency collaboration, which and that coherence can always be a challenge. I think data quality at the beginning, you know, we're going to get better than where we start, I'm certain. But just as Amanda said, what is most compelling to me is that access and opportunity. And we have 171 districts across our state, and each and every student deserves the opportunity to be able to utilize this information if they so choose. And so we want to make sure that the processes and the strategic planning on our part is something that is scalable and sustainable for the individual needs of each and every district. So that matters very much to us.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Well, we will be collecting questions from everyone who's watching the webinar today, and we'll make sure that if there are questions we can't answer, we'll get those to you all for feedback and make sure we get all the good information out. Just really appreciate both of you all taking time out of your busy schedules to be here today and sharing information about the My Kentucky Future Act. Any final words before we go?
Mine would be just to encourage families to really read that and trust the system. Our campuses and education system, really from P through 16 and beyond, are really excellent and are working every day to make a difference in Kentucky students' lives. And so don't be hesitant. It will be an opportunity that really everyone can learn from. So I hope everyone will encourage it.
100%.
And I would just add, you know, reach out. If you have questions, please reach out. We are here to support you. And I know that is across multiple stakeholders in the process, but you know, we want schools and districts to feel empowered. We want them to be proactive. But if there are questions, we are here to help. And
absolutely.
That's not just lip service.
That's so true. And you know, with anything new, I'm sure there will be questions. So we appreciate both of you all being here today. And we'll for sure send you any questions that we get from our viewers today. So thanks again.
Thank you, Robin.
All right. I did see a couple of questions come in, and I will definitely be sure to share those with Mickey and Amanda and follow up with any information that is needed. Well, as we finish up our time together today, I'd like to let you know about a couple of really timely professional development opportunities and some resources that are coming soon from CPE. As you all may know, House Bill 193 from 2025 clarified language around general education courses that are eligible for the dual credit scholarship. So understanding Kentucky's general education core is really important information for everyone and anyone who advises students about dual credit or their post-secondary journey for that matter. So many have not had the opportunity to learn deeply about Kentucky's general education core. So CPE is currently developing an asynchronous PD module on Kentucky's general education core that will be housed within Futurity. And I hope that you're already familiar with Futurity, but this is our website about how Kentuckians find their future. Now, this PD module will be available to anyone and for free who is interested in learning more about Kentucky's general education core. So be watching for an announcement about that PD opportunity coming soon. It should be out within the next week or so. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to Mitzi Holland, who's going to share some useful updates from KAA.
Thank you, Robin. And Heather, if you don't mind sharing those slides, I would appreciate it. All right, so I'm excited to share with you all today that we've recently launched a post-secondary advising scope and sequence that is aligned in grades 6 through 12. The scope and sequence starts in 6th grade with exploration and looks at preparing students and applying the knowledge that they've learned in middle school toward a career pathway in high school. And then in 9th and 10th grade, it gives them opportunities to investigate and connect careers and interests. And then finally in 11th and 12th grade, it focuses on decision and action. And the scope and sequence is aligned around 4 key categories: career exploration, post-secondary opportunities, financial literacy, and essential skills. If you'll go to the next slide, please. The post-secondary advising scope and sequence is really two main parts. One is focused on the middle school, grades 6 through 8, and then of course the high school. The high school is broken down into grades 9 and 10, then 11 and 12, because we understand and know that what students need in 9th and 10th grade is vastly different from what they need in 11th and 12th grade. And this whole post-secondary advising scope and sequence is designed to serve as a roadmap for consistent and high quality advising, because statistics show that students who receive intentional, systemic, and holistic advising are much more likely to develop a college-going identity early. They're more likely to not only enroll in college, but attend college and complete a post-secondary credential. Within the scope and sequence, there are lesson plans for each of the grades in career exploration, post-secondary opportunities, financial literacy, and essential skills. So each grade level would have 4 lesson plans, and those lesson plans are designed to intentionally align the experiences from each grade. So what you learn in 6th grade builds for 7th, so on, all the way through 12th grade. This scope and sequence, if you'll go to the next slide, is housed on Futurity. And you can go to futurity.org, select I am a counselor educator, and look for the drop-down menu there and select post-secondary advising scope and sequence, and then click on that green arrow button. There are QR codes in this slide show that will take you directly to the post-secondary advising scope and sequence on Futurity. We also have on the next slide an implementation implementation playbook. This is a playbook that really supports you with the resources that you need to begin implementation. And within the implementation playbook, or post-secondary advising playbook, there is an asynchronous training module that walks you through the steps for implementation. It gives you an opportunity to reflect on your current post-secondary advising system, and then really think about how you can create buy-in among stakeholders to build a post-secondary advising culture within your school. So it talks about the importance of a leadership team, and then creating buy-in to utilize stakeholders in your building, because in all honesty, post-secondary advising is the responsibility of all within a school. So this works you through how to create buy-in and how to build out that post-secondary advising culture. The asynchronous training module does allow you an opportunity to receive 2.5 hours of ELA credit. At the end of that training module, you have the opportunity to download a certificate. That certificate can be then emailed to me, and then I will in turn send you your ELA certificate via email. So we certainly hope that you all will take some time to look through the playbook and take advantage of that asynchronous training. And as always, if you have questions regarding implementation or the post-secondary advising scope and sequence, we would certainly encourage you to reach out. And that brings me to the last couple of slides that we have today. As always, you have an opportunity to earn ELA credit for our webinars if you're able to attend live. You can scan the QR code or type in the bit.ly, and I think Heather's dropping all of these links in the chat as well. We certainly encourage you to complete that evaluation. Your feedback is very important to us as we look to build out future webinars and really making sure that we're covering the content that you all need and want. So your feedback is valuable and is used as we plan out future offerings through CPE and the Kentucky Advising Academy. And that brings us to our final thought for the day. As you all are aware, this was our first webinar of the new school year series, and we have 2 upcoming webinars. In August, we have one August the 4th that is focused on helping students make college credit count. And then we have an additional August webinar on August the 18th that looks at supporting students through early post-secondary opportunities. I will say the August 18th webinar is not only focusing on dual credit, but also thinking about early post-secondary opportunities in relation to work-based learning and internships and those sorts of things. So you can register for the series once and then get access to all the webinars, or you can select the webinars that you want to register for, but we certainly encourage you to register for all of them, get those calendar invites on your calendar, and we look forward to seeing you at future webinars. I'm going to give Robin an opportunity to come back on and add anything that maybe I have missed.
Thanks, Mitzi. I don't have anything to add. I think we've summed it up. Heather, thank you for putting all of the links into the chat. And I also added the one for the registration for the entire webinar series for anybody who has not had the chance to fill that out. Please share it with your colleagues who might be interested. And we thank you for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you on the 4th.
Thank you all.